This is the Polaris RZR Pro R, side-by-side in RC form, released just weeks ago, and it's an awesome recreation of the real thing. But how does it bash, and how fast does it go? Well, today, let's test it. This is the Losi RZR Rey. If you're not familiar with the RZR Pro R, it's only one of the nastiest side-by-side off-road rigs that Polaris offers. Coming in with a wide 74-inch stance, 16 inches of ground clearance, 29 inches of suspension travel, and about 225 horsepower. Previously, if you've wanted a side-by-side in RC form, you're kind of SOL, unless you made it yourself. There is the Axial Yeti Junior Can-Am as an option, but it's pretty dang small and has limited capabilities. So now, for Losi to come out with a larger 1/10 scale size based side-by-side, it's really cool. And it's all officially licensed. Now this is a ready-to-run car that's available in 2 different colors, but it comes out of the box, configured, programmed, painted, and ready to go. The only thing needed is a battery pack for the vehicle. AA batteries for the transmitter are included. Now the first thing that I noticed about the scale realism on this vehicle is that there's no light bleeding through. RC cars are usually always have these voids or pockets where you can see under the body into the chassis, and this car has none, which really helps polish up that scale realistic look. There is a small pocket in the front area where you can kind of see through. Maybe the real car is like that. But overall, the body and chassis integration and the way they fit together seamlessly has been done really, really well. Now for the size of this, Losi is calling it 1/10 scale. And if you compare it to other 1/10 scale vehicles, they're gonna be very similar in size. There's a lot of people online though that are taking issue with its physical size being too big than the real RZR would be if you shrunk it down to 10th scale, making this too big to pull behind another 1/10 scale vehicle on a trailer. Instead, what YouTuber Hemystorm pointed out is that the physical size for this vehicle is more about a 1/6 scale after you do the math. It's 10th scale because it uses 10th scale size components. But with that 1/6 scale size, it looks really proportional and correct behind the Axial SCX6. Now just like the real thing, this RZR Rey has a pretty nice suspension. In the front end, it's an independent suspension with a double wishbone configuration. It's an oil-filled long travel shock that has a threaded spring collar at the top so you can adjust the spring tension. You can also change the shock fluid if you want. Now the rear suspension on this thing is pretty slick to mimic the real thing. And basically, we have another independent suspension setup back here but using a trailing arm. So instead of using wishbones for our suspension, we have these links that go from the center out to the trailing arm with an upper and lower link. Now that suspension setup is not officially licensed, but these tires and wheels sure are. And these are the BF Goodrich KM3 2.2 rubber tires, and they're glued to the Raceline A93 podium wheels. Now these wheels require an 8mm nut wrench to get this wheel nut off, and the wheel pulls right off with a 12mm hex behind it. This thing will accept a lot of different tires and wheel combinations, including a lot of the rock crawler tires and wheels that you could bolt right up on here. One last scale piece with these tires and wheels is with the brake disc and calipers behind them. They look pretty slick, they spin as the tire spins, and it's just one more element to realism. Speaking of realism, how about this body? Officially licensed through Polaris. Now the first thing, there's no exposed body clips. The clips are underneath the body, so it stays nice and clean. And then we've got a mixture of hard plastic and Lexan panels coupled together with plastic tubing to create a roll bar cage setup. And it helps create that body and chassis all in one kind of look. Now like I mentioned, there's 4 body clips to pop off the body underneath, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And then this body just lifts straight up and off the chassis. Now this is one solid body, and flipping it over, you can see all the tubing that's used underneath. Now on the top, you can see these big plastic arches here that they've added in the front and in the back. Now inside there's also an interior piece. This is not a Lexan piece in here. That's a little bit harder material, like a hard plastic. And we have 2 molded in driver figures sitting in seats with helmets. The driver is holding onto the steering wheel. There's a whole dash setup in here with little decals mimicking our instrument panel. Now in the middle, in the center console area between the drivers, there's a rectangle spot cut out. That's where the on and off switch for the ESC pokes through, so you can easily get to it. Now underneath the body, this is quite the setup, dominated by all these big molded plastic parts. The main chassis plate though is still an aluminum plate, and it has been elongated to go all the way back to that rear gearbox, where previous Rey models did not. There's also a second aluminum chassis plate that's used on the top here inside. The battery box is pretty nice with one body clip to unhinge the flap. And then the battery that we're gonna use is this Spectrum Smart battery. It's a 3-cell 5,000 milliamps, and you see here that it mounts on the side, but mounted in there, it's a perfect fit. Now this is hard to see, but underneath the aluminum top plate is the center drive shaft, giving the front end power because this is a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Now another cool thing on this car is this front molded bumper that looks like the real thing, and there are headlights in here. These are light lenses, even though there's a decal over them, so when you turn the car on, the lights will shine also. In the back of the car, we have the same thing. These are molded taillights, so when you turn on the vehicle, you've got rear taillights. Now for the electronics in this thing, they're brushless and they're water resistant, so you can get them a little wet. For the steering, it's the Spectrum S614S steel gear waterproof servo. For the motor, it's a brushless 3800 kV 4-pull Spectra Firma motor, and it's compatible with a 2 and 3 cell LiPo battery, and it's got this big old massive heat sink on it. The ESC is also a Spectra Firma unit. It's 130 amps, and it's actually compatible with 2-cell, 3-cell, and 4-cell, but you can't use 4-cell in the vehicle. There's also an IC5 connector attached, so you'll need an IC5 or EC5 connected battery to get this thing to work. Now for the receiver, it's an AVC-enabled Spectrum receiver, which means there's a gyro counter-steering the front tires for you when things get squirrely, and you can actually control how much that activates with a knob on the transmitter. It's pretty dang nice. The transmitter is a DX3, which has your basic trims, that AVC adjustment knob, and then if you use smart batteries, the LED indicator on the transmitter will tell you how much power remains when you're out ripping it around. Speaking of ripping it around, how fast is the Losi RZR Rey? Using the 3S Smart battery we talked about earlier, we put down a few full speed passes, and the Losi RZR hit 45 miles an hour right on the nose. And I'm happy to report the car was pretty stable and comfortable to drive full speed on the street. There is some torque twist as you get on it with all that traction, but going straight is good. Turning, on the other hand, really exposes the soft nature of the suspension and the extra grippy tires. And if you're going too fast, you will traction roll fairly easily. I think it's safe to say that this soft suspension is meant for the off-road. You could change it, of course, and retune it, but the out-of-the-box experience is meant for dirt. We spent little time on that pavement for obvious reasons, and next we drove through this field no problem. There is a bit of tall green grass here, but it didn't slow us down. This unseen bump somewhere in the surface sure did, but nothing broke. And I'm happy to report that nothing broke ever the entire test of this car. We just got the car after that crash and noticed the body popped out from these lower plastic mounts here where it connects to. Nothing broke, it just needs to be popped back in place. Just like that. For some dirt experience, we ripped the RZR around the parking lot of our local RC track. It's rained a lot out here recently, but it's mostly dry, but overall the dirt is really awesome. First thing, full throttle, rip it back and forth, and as you can see, it handles this terrain exceptionally well, even maxed out at 45 miles an hour. The RZR is actually so stable, I eventually start turning in these high-speed passes, intentionally throwing out the rear to emphasize the suspension and the flinging rocks. Not once in throwing out the rear end did I get the car to lose control or loop out on me. And the AVC is set at about 15-20%. That's how it came out of the box, and we never touched it. The car was so stable with these high-speed passes that we started making these big old sweeping turns at the end, going full speed, and the RZR did bicycle at one point, but that was me just trying to ride that edge. It never rolled over on us. If you tried hard enough, you could get it to traction roll, but it's gonna make you work for it. The dirt is where the Losi RZR calls home. It's a place where it can slide a little, shift its weight, fling some roost, and sail off into the sunset. If you want this car to drive on the pavement, you will be disappointed. Like a fish is meant for water, the Losi RZR is meant for dirt, just like a real Polaris RZR. You don't have all that ground clearance and suspension travel for nothing. It's meant for rough off-road. Now, I'd say the Losi RZR is such a great surface skimmer, it's right up there with the other groundhogs, like the Arrma Mojave, the Fireteam, and the UDR. These are all vehicles designed with soft, plushy suspensions and an aggressive, hard-hitting power delivery that, instead of popping wheelies when you gas it, they fling earth to the sky. Guys, go check out the Losi RZR with our links down below, and if you want more RC videos, well, check these out.